they only had one single seed round of funding. Unlike a lot of the apps out there that do multiple rounds of funding and spend tons of money, Zapier only needed a single round of funding. They raised $1.3 million in their seed round back in 2012. Today, they're valued at $5 billion.
I think that their lack of funding wasn't just one of their advantages. It was like their single biggest advantage, because when you have this like massive amount of VC money, you have like an urge to just spend it all. Their constraints force them to be profitable right from the start.
That's how they got their first customer. They messaged somebody off one of these forums. They got paid $100 via PayPal in order to do that kind of integration. And that really solidified the idea that this is something that consumers might actually want. In a world like the one that we live in today, where I can just ask my AI agent to write a script to connect two APIs together, people might be wondering if they even need Zapier anymore.
But that's why Zapier proactively made that pivot from automation to everyone to now it's AI orchestration and enterprise RevOps. They knew this was coming.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the How We Scaled podcast. On this podcast, we're going to be exploring how the marketing teams behind some of the biggest brands of our time sell to you and me. So on this podcast, this is going to be our first episode, and I'm going to be joined here with Josh, and I'm excited to be going through one of the biggest brands on the internet today.
Hey guys. So welcome to the show. Just before we jump into Zapier, just some context for who we are. We run Nomadic Advertising. We're a full service marketing agency, and we've been doing this since 2014. And we just love looking at how other marketing agencies and businesses are building their brands out. So we're going to be looking at Zapier today, and Johnny's got some info here.
Yeah. So if you're not familiar with Zapier and what they do, it's basically a SaaS platform for connecting different kinds of applications together. So for example, let's say every time you get an email, you wanted the email contents to go into a Google spreadsheet, then you could basically connect your email with Google Sheets. But they have tons of different integrations, right? So there's tons of different software out there, and Zapier just makes it easy for you to connect it all together. But the story behind Zapier, I think, is a lot more interesting than the product itself. If you haven't heard of this story, you don't know anything about it, basically, it's a really unique story because unlike most of the SaaS companies out there that start up in Silicon Valley in California, Zapier actually was founded in Missouri. And the founders founded it because they had this exact same problem. So they were freelancers. They were frustrated with always having to manually connect different kinds of web apps together for their clients. And so they came up with this idea for a website that does that for you. And the interesting thing about Zapier is that they only had one single seed round of funding. Unlike a lot of the apps out there that do multiple rounds of funding and spend tons of money, Zapier only needed a single round of funding. They raised $1.3 million in their seed round back in 2012. Today, they're valued at $5 billion. So quite a crazy story. And one of the other interesting things about Zapier is the approach that they took. They were one of the first companies, at least that I know of, that was fully remote. They went fully remote right from the start, simply because they were, like I mentioned, in Missouri. And they wanted to hire top engineers. They didn't want to just hire people within their local market. So they decided to hire people from all over the world. And like I mentioned, before COVID. So this was really kind of more of a crazy concept than it is today. But it worked out really well for them. At least I think so. I don't know, Josh, what do you think about their approach and maybe how their lack of multiple rounds of funding actually helped them in a way?
Yeah, absolutely, Johnny. I think that their lack of funding wasn't just one of their advantages. It was like their single biggest advantage, because when you have this massive amount of VC money, you have an urge to just spend it all, get a big office, hire the most expensive engineers, and then use that to try to generate more money from investors. But what they were instead forced to do was, as you said, hire people from around the world without a localized office. So they're saving money on rent. They're getting cheaper labor costs. And it really allowed them to refine their work on a smaller scale before expanding out and building something really large that they weren't ready for. Like the constraints that they have, they don't just breed creativity, they breed like necessity. Like their constraints force them to be profitable right from the start because they didn't have that massive VC war chest to work with. Yeah, they were profitable and product led from day one. So that's something that you don't get just from VC money. That's something that you have to build by themselves, like through this process. So like, do you think if they actually had the money for all that, like San Francisco office, $100 million to spend on research and development, like, do you think they would have actually survived, or do you think they would have like become one of these other Silicon Valley startups that just fade out after burning through all of their funding?
Yeah, as you mentioned, like when you start to get funding, you get a lot of funding, you get, let's say, millions of dollars. It's really easy to splurge on random things like offices and that kind of stuff. But not only that, you also have the pressure of all of the people that invested in your company, that they're trying to make their return. They're trying to get their return as soon as possible. So I definitely think that had they just right from the beginning gotten tons of funding, it probably would have hurt them more than it benefited them. So I think it was kind of a blessing in disguise that everything worked out the way that it did for them. And I also think that because of the way that they got their funding, because of the way that they started their company, they were able to do some interesting things in terms of marketing that maybe otherwise they wouldn't have done. So this kind of gets into the meat of the podcast here, which the whole idea is to explore how some of these brands became well-known brands, became well-known names. And one of the first things that Zapier did to kind of prove their concept and see if this was a product that they really wanted, that consumers really wanted, was go to different kinds of forums and online communities. So, they went to the Salesforce forums, they went to 37 Signals forum. 37 Signals are the creator of Basecamp. So they went to all of these kind of communities where people were hanging out, where their potential customers were hanging out. And they looked for people that were specifically complaining about this problem. So people that had two tools that they wanted to connect together, they didn't have any kind of integration for it, and they were looking for a solution. And they did find, some people asking for this kind of a solution. That's how they got their first customer. They messaged somebody off one of these forums. They got paid $100 via PayPal in order to do that kind of integration. And that really solidified the idea that this is something that consumers might actually want.
Yeah, like that first $100, it's not a lot of money, but it was really like a proof of concept that by finding these things that people are actually asking for, they're able to make a profit. So it wasn't just about $100, it was really about proving that to themselves. By going through these forums and finding what people actually want, they're able to develop things that they're able to sell immediately, that they're not going to have to market this to people. They're able to just find the people who need it, show it to them, say, hey, look, we have this software that does the thing that you're looking for. And people are willing to buy that right off the bat, like, because that's what they've been looking for. So they've really been letting the forums at this point dictate their product. But now it's 2026, so looking for like our clients or new startups that are starting, what does forum trolling really look like now? There's Reddit and Discord, maybe like some sort of AI communities. I'm not sure, Johnny, if you have any ideas on that.
Yeah, so I definitely think that this is a smart thing to do. Even in 2026, I think this still works. And I think one of the reasons why a lot of companies fail, especially the companies that are trying to do something innovative, something different, something that's not already on the market, is because they don't prove the concept. They don't get those early customers. They don't have enough conversations with the community. So I definitely think that you can do that today. And like you mentioned, there's Reddit, there's Discord. Back, 10, 15 years ago, there were probably more of these forums out there and more of these kind of smaller websites out there where you could find your niche community. But nowadays, everything's on Reddit. Even, let's say, Facebook groups exist.
Yeah,
that are quite popular. So it doesn't really matter if the place has changed. Even if you wanted to do this before the internet, you would be going to maybe meetups in person. It's not about where these conversations are happening. It's more about actually having the conversations, and the conversations are still happening today. So you can definitely get involved inside of the specific communities that you're trying to cater to. understand what their problems are, and try to build the perfect solution for them. So I definitely think that this can work. And maybe it's just about refining it for your specific industry. So I don't know, Josh, like what would you say if you're a local business and you wanted to do something like this? How could you execute this idea?
Yeah, so I think it's a lot of exactly what you were already saying. It's finding the places where people are having these conversations. So a lot of the time that's going to be in different Facebook groups. Maybe it's local Facebook groups. People are looking for different services in their neighborhood. Maybe it's a group for tech support on Reddit where people are asking for something like Zapier, like not exactly, but something that's more relevant to you. So yeah, there's a lot of these different communities and you just need to be finding the ones that are relevant to your business so that you can get in there and show people your solutions and find out what the problems that they're trying to solve are.
Yeah, for sure. And so moving on to another strategy that Zapier used from the beginning was actually using SEO. And I think that this is really interesting because we do a lot of SEO for our clients. So uncovering how some of these companies used SEO to really take off in the beginning is always interesting for me to look at. So I'm going to just bring up here an example of what this strategy looked like that Zapier had employed for their SEO strategy in the beginning. So you can see here, I've just done a search on Google for this term of connect Facebook leads to Google Sheets. And you'll see that Zapier, they come up here on Google. And so this is exactly the strategy that they used when they first began, is they've created a lot of landing pages. They actually took a programmatic approach where they automatically created all of these different landing pages showing off all of the different types of connections that their platform supported. So if you were to go to Google and you were to search, how do I connect X application with Y application? Their page would pop up. And this worked. This was extremely effective at the time because as far as I know, they were one of the first ones to market with a product like this. And they had almost no competition. But there were tons of people that were searching for these kinds of integration. So that kind of goes also back to what we talked about earlier, where we can see that this approach of looking at these communities, looking at the problems that people were having, actually really benefited them also on Google, because a lot of people were having these problems and there wasn't a good solution on the market. And so once they actually created the solution and they created all these pages on their website, they were the default answer. And they actually took it a step further because not only did they automatically create these pages using the content from their own team, but they worked together with the different kinds of applications that they were integrating into their product, and they had them write descriptions for their products. So that kind of took it a step further where they weren't even having to create their own content, but they were actually getting their partners to create the content for them. So I think that was just kind of a genius strategy as well. I wish that we could get our clients to write all of the content for us as well. But of course, many of them hire us specifically for the purpose of writing the content on their behalf. But I don't know, what do you think about this strategy? And is this something that people can still do today, or is it not really relevant anymore?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I think it is still relevant. Like, it's still a great strategy, but you just have to be a little bit smarter about it. The strategy itself, like just creating like massive amounts of content to meet these different, to find these different combinations and things that people are searching for. They didn't just generate all like random content. It was like very specific intent matching pages. Like, I need to use app A and app B and I need them to work together. So like finding something like that in your industry will always work. Agents in 2026 obviously just make that much cheaper to do. Like, you could build 10 times more pages in maybe the same amount of time just because you're having AI write a lot of that content. But the thing you said about like being noisy, that's definitely a new reality that you have to work around, because Google and other search engines, they're getting saturated with a lot of like generic AI content. So it's not just about volume. You also need to have that like authenticity, which is what Zapier did by kind of crowdsourcing the work. So they had their partners write the descriptions, which allowed their partners to insert things that they felt were very important for people who are searching to know. So the idea that you need to go into this with is, how can I make my content more unique or more valuable than just some generic AI content? Like, you could still just be using AI, but you need to be working with it with a little bit of a more fine touch, because otherwise you will get drowned out in the noise. So yeah, I do think it is still like a gold mine, but it's just you might need a better pickaxe. So yeah, like, but what do you think for our clients who might not be like software companies, more like local businesses or logistics or real estate? Like, can they still use this strategy, this like programmatic mindset to dominate local search?
Yeah, I definitely think that this strategy can be used for local search as well. And like you mentioned, if you pair this with AI, it gets a lot easier to do. And I think that there's actually a lot more use cases of how you can do this. And I think programmatic SEO is only going to get more and more popular because of AI. So I definitely think that this is something that businesses can be using. And just to give an example of how local businesses could do something like this is, for example, they can use AI to programmatically create pages for every single neighborhood, every single service area that they work in. So if somebody is searching specifically for their kind of service in that specific neighborhood, they'll find one of those programmatic pages that's going to be super relevant to them. So I definitely think that this can still work. This can definitely still work for all types of businesses. It's just about being smart on how can you make something that's going to be really relevant and really helpful for your customers, and then use AI to make it ultra specific and to create the content for all the different ways that users can search for that service or product. Mm-hmm. Now, speaking on, the topic of SEO, the topic of Google search, there was another thing that I noticed that I think is super interesting about Zapier's strategy, but now this is talking about their Google ads. I took a look at the types of Google ads that they were running, and I saw that they had a really interesting approach. And the reason why I say that is because a lot of the times when we look at the Google ads that different companies are running, they're very, very focused on the bottom of the funnel. They want to show the ads on Google to users that are already ready to buy or that are specifically searching for their types of services or products. But Zapier actually kind of takes a different approach that mirrors a little bit their SEO strategy. So for their SEO strategy, we saw that they're creating these kinds of pages for people looking to make connections. One thing that we didn't mention about their SEO strategy is that they also create a lot of different kinds of guides, and they're advertising those guides in their Google ads too. So for example, they have a Google ad talking about how to use Google Sheets, a beginner's guide. They also have an ad that says like the 8 best WordPress form plugins in 2025. So they're creating these guides or this content that isn't even about them. This one about the 8 best WordPress form plugins, it really doesn't have to do that much with Zapier, yet they're doing it. So why are they spending money to drive this, maybe very top of funnel or even irrelevant traffic to their website? What do you think?
Yeah, so I don't think it's even like irrelevant stuff. Like it's all extremely relevant to Zapier, because by getting people who are searching, let's say like Google Sheets tutorials, eventually somebody who's using Google Sheets might need to connect Google Sheets to another application. And when they see that like the first thing that they found the guide on was Zapier's website, they might have looked at other pages on Zapier's website and seen, oh, I can connect Zapier, I can connect Google Sheets using Zapier to a lot of other applications. So it's pretty much paying to get people to know who Zapier is and understand that Zapier integrates with a lot of different softwares. So by directing traffic to their like educational software or the educational content, they establish authority and they begin lead nurturing and integrating with their paid efforts to their long-term compounding SEO strategy. So we normally, like in our case, we normally strictly separate our SEO blogs from our PPC landing pages. So when do you think it actually makes sense for a company to break that rule and run ads directly to informative content like Zapier is doing here?
Yeah, I think that you're right that they're really trying to kind of capture that market very early on in the user's journey. I think the reason why Zapier can do this and other companies generally stay away from it is because of the fact that they're so big. They were one of the first ones on the market. And so they position themselves as kind of the number one solution in the market. And they're probably at least at the time, a few years ago, they were definitely the most well-known on the market. And I think that the strategy is all about protecting that and making sure that they stay the number one on the market, making sure that anybody that's doing any research for anything that's somewhat related to them finds out about them, finds out about what they do and what their product does early on in the journey, so they don't end up going to some other kind of competitor that they learn about when they're actually at the phase of doing the integration. So I think they kind of want to get a jump start on their competitors and reach the market first. And I think that they can do that only because they are as big as they are today. So for them, they're really thinking long term. Their strategy is all about building that authority, like you mentioned. It's about building that brand awareness. And in order to build that authority and build that brand awareness, they just want to capture as much traffic as they can, introduce as many people as possible to their brand. And they're not looking at it as, okay, am I going to make my money back in the next month? Like some smaller businesses might be looking at their advertising campaigns where they're trying to make an immediate return, but they're probably looking at it on more of a long-term scale. 5 years from now, where are we going to be? How do we position ourselves so that we're the most well-known in the market? But I did notice also that they've kind of been changing their positioning. They've been changing their wording, the way that they are showing themselves to the market. In the past, Zapier always talked about automation and how they're creating an automation for everyone. But recently, they've actually changed the way that they talk about themselves. And they talk not just about automation, but they also talk a lot about AI. And they talk about how they are the complete toolkit for AI automation. They even use this AI orchestration kind of terminology in some places. And I think that here they're really trying to show people that they're still relevant, because in a world like the one that we live in today, where I can just ask my AI agent to write a script to connect two APIs together, people might be wondering if they even need Zapier anymore.
Yeah. I mean, at like a basic level, can ChatGPT write a script that can connect to APIs? Like it could. So like that part, maybe Zapier might be losing its grip on, but that's why Zapier proactively like made that pivot from automation to everyone to now it's AI orchestration and enterprise RevOps. They knew this was coming. So like an AI, if you're just connecting to APIs, it can write a script, but it can't govern like maybe hundreds or thousands of multi-step like workflows across like your whole business. So Zapier is like consolidating all of that, and they're becoming sort of the hub for these AI agents to use Zapier to connect to each other or to connect to other services. So they're trying to become like the operating system of these AI connections. So the new narrative that they've created, it's pretty smart. They've kind of like redefined themselves as like an essential backbone for making sure that different AI agents and LLMs and these different enterprise tools can play nicely together securely. And like they have support. Like if something goes wrong with the API script that you created on ChatGPT at like 2 a.m. one night, something goes wrong, like you don't really have any support other than maybe asking ChatGPT again. But at least with Zapier, you're paying someone, you have a team of support, you have a team of engineers who are creating this system. So it's actually something that you can trust. So I think they still have an advantage in that sense. So
yeah,
like,
definitely makes sense.
Yeah, like this was a very proactive evolution. Before they were forced to do it, they've been getting ready for this. So I'd like to hear your thoughts. Like, how can we see these shifts coming in other industries beforehand? Like Zapier seemed like they had a sort of prescience about this.
Yeah, I definitely think that it's something that every business should be thinking about because the world that we live in today, I mean, we all know technology is changing every day. Everything is changing all around us. With AI, it seems like that's just happening even faster. So I really think it's actually healthy for businesses to have a little bit of kind of skepticism about how do they make sure that they stay on the market and if somebody else is going to overtake them or some other kind of solution is going to come out there. But I really think that the best way to stay on top of these shifts, it actually goes back to the first thing that we talked about with how Zapier got involved in their communities, how they were looking for questions that people were asking or problems that people had within their target audience. And I think that if you're active in those communities, you're constantly seeing what's going on, what's the conversation, what are the problems that people are having, then you're going to start to see as the market shifts, the problems that people have also shift. So in the past, the problem that Zapier was solving might have been people trying to connect two applications together. In the future, the problem might be people trying to connect their applications to their AI agent. And how do I get my AI agent to use all these applications that I use? And so they're repositioning their messaging and their strategy and even, the way that their software works in order to meet the demands and the problems that they see that their customers are going to have in the future.
Yeah. So just to kind of bring this all home, looking at everything that we've covered from like their scrappy beginnings to the pivot to the AI orchestration, what do you think is the absolute number one lesson that you'd take away from the Zapier playbook?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of lessons and a lot of things that we talked about here, but probably the number one thing that I would say that we could take away from this just goes all the way down again to that beginning point that we talked about of being involved in your community. If you're involved in your community, like we said, you're going to see the changes coming before they happen. So you're going to be able to evolve your narrative as you have to. You're going to be able to make sure that your company is actually going to take off, that it's going to be able to grow, that you're creating a product that people actually want. And that can help you to develop your SEO mode as well, because if you know the questions that people are asking, you know the content that you should be creating. Because if people are asking those questions on forums and in these communities, they're probably asking it to Google as well. And that's a good indicator that, hey, you should probably create that kind of content talking about the solution for your website as well. And the other thing is that Zapier's product, I think, ended up being also their most powerful marketing. So because they built their product around the problems that their customers are facing, the marketing comes naturally. Like, I don't know if they had really thought about this whole SEO strategy to create all these pages about how these applications connect together, or if they were just thinking, well, we want to show off all the things that our product can do, so we need to create all these pages in order to do that. Because either way, whether they had thought about it from an SEO perspective or just from a perspective of getting the information out, the result was the same. They got all of this SEO traffic. So I think if you have a really good product, just naturally creating content about that product and the solution that you're solving is going to work to gain traction and to get traffic to your site, because people are going to be searching for that solution. And one last thing that I think we can take away from Zapier that we didn't really discuss much on this video, but that I think is worth mentioning, is they seem to understand their customers very well and the different types of customers that they have and where those customers live online. And a really good example is if you check out their YouTube channel, because what you'll see is that for their long form videos, they have a lot of interviews, a lot of kind of conversations with CEOs and these high level executives that talk about the big picture of how Zapier helps them. But if you look at their short content, what you see is a lot of content created for the users that are using Zapier. Maybe not the ones that are the CEOs, but the ones that are working in the company and they're creating some kind of integrations. They're trying to actually utilize the product. And you can see how the messaging and the way that they talk to these different customers shifts depending on the channel that you look at.
Yeah. Zapier has a lot of great takeaways here to take away from this. So yeah, thank you, Johnny. Some great information. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you as well. And I think that that'll wrap it up for this video. I hope that everybody enjoyed this, that there was some kind of takeaway that you could take away from this discussion to use towards your business. And we'll see you on the next one.
Yeah. See you guys.